Welcome to another installment of HAC TV. I am so excited about being here tonight with you. HAC TV is how the Haitian American Caucus is still bringing you the members of our community, vital information and resources. The Haitian American Caucus is a global community development nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide Haitian communities around the world with access to information and resources that will foster self-development and success. My name is Rashidi Denson, and I will be your host tonight. Tonight, we have partnered with FDC to kick off our series, The Language of Scars. We are so excited about having you tonight. We have an amazing, awesome guest tonight. Dr. Chikera Marshall will be joining us, and we're going to dialogue and really help you understand what the language of scars really mean. Good evening, Dr. Marshall.
Good evening. Good evening, Rashidi. How are you?
I am so excited about having you on this platform tonight. I truly believe that we're going to do something powerful and allow individuals to really understand and really get firsthand your story from your own heart, your own lips. I just want to say this real quickly, that usually when you talk about domestic violence and we get into these types of conversations, usually someone is telling you someone else's story, right? They're sharing something that they heard or something that they experienced about someone else. But tonight we want to accomplish something amazing. We want to actually allow you to own your story by telling it yourself. And so our theme tonight is we want to conquer the effect after the effect, right, of abuse. And we want to talk about that because a lot of times people do what's called cause and effect. So if someone is getting hit, usually they will turn around and start hitting, and so we want to really break that down and find out what is the language behind the scars, what really happened, and how did the healing take place. So what I would like to do is give you an opportunity, Dr. Marshall, to share with our viewers, give a little history of yourself. Where do you come from? How did you get to this stage of credibility in your community?
Well, first, I'd like to say hello, everyone that's tuned in. And I want to say thank you to the Haitian American Caucus? I want to make sure I say it right.
Right.
Right. I want to make sure that I say thank you for having me. So just to give a little quick background, sort of like a short bio, and then I'll go into my story, if that's okay. I am the founder of Her New Leaf Coaching. It's a coaching program that really transforms lives. Really, that's my point, is to help women overcome trauma, to help them develop their mindset and to achieve their goals. That's something that I think pretty much the effect or the result of going through domestic violence and trauma is something that completely gets affected, and women actually don't end up achieving any of their goals. And so it's really my goal and my job to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I like to call myself, and a lot of other people call me this, that would be the restoration specialist. Right. So if you pretty much have to start all over again, that's my job, to coach you to that place. And
Wow.
So that's what I'm called to do by God, and that's what I'm definitely doing. So a little bit of background: I have over 20 years of experience in social work and human resources. I've done everything from counseling to case management to group and individual counseling young girls and women who are coming out of prison. And as well as HR, have some city experience, and I currently hold a accredited bachelor's in social work. I have a master's in psychology and a doctorate in Christian education.
That is very impressive, especially when you made the statement about starting over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know we're going to get into that,
Mm-hmm.
but you actually made a very powerful statement. You said start over, but when we listen to you, it don't look like you started over. It looked like you continue to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And we really want to get into that because there's a unspoken language behind the scars.
Mm-hmm.
People often sometimes see people's scars and they determine what's behind it, but you know the language because you bear them.
Yes.
And so that is amazing. And just as I pass the baton back to you, over 20 years, that means that you've been in a position to help rescue other people like a fireman.
Absolutely. And the thing about really being there for other people is that, I think firemen have to really learn, right? So you get wisdom over time. So, and I'm just throwing this in there that you might meet a new fireman and a more seasoned fireman will walk into a place and say, we need to leave now. And the newer fireman will step outside and say, well, why did we need to leave? And it turns around and the whole building goes into an inferno. And he'll look back at the fireman and say, well, how did you know? While the other fireman with experience will say, well, the floor was dense, the walls were sweating. There were all of these indications, right, that this place was about to go up, but there was no fire, right? And so over time, you learn wisdom, especially as you come out and really face, yourself, your fears, and grow. You're able to kind of help someone out. The fire.
Wow. As you was talking, it reminded me a few weeks ago, I had a conversation and it reminded me that I had a conversation about the firemen, and someone was actually telling me, they said that firemen, if they have to go into a building, an emergency, right, run into a building that's on blaze, mm-hmm. and they don't have their equipment, meaning they don't have their jacket on or anything, they say before they run in the building, they first endouse themselves in water. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was amazing. So they have to put themselves in water. And we know water represents cleansing. Water represents purity. Mm-hmm. So let's talk to that a little bit, Dr. Marshall. Have you been in a situation where you had to go rescue someone else and you had to purify yourself first? You had to wash yourself first.
Definitely. I think I wasn't qualified to help anybody until I came through the washing, right? So if you are still in the midst of the trauma or the overcoming of the trauma, you really can't help anybody. So wow. You have to completely come out. And once you come out, I don't necessarily know that immediately you're ready, because I think once you come out, you really need some training if that is what you're called to do, right? So if you're called to do that, then, this wisdom and experience and education, all of these things need to come together so that you are a healed person coaching someone that needs to be healed. And so yeah, definitely.
That is you said some really key things there: training, mm-hmm. Understanding, and you talked about from a level of being in that position where you allow yourself to be trained properly, mm-hmm. right? So it's not that you just running off of just your experience. You've allowed yourself, right, to get some expert advice, mm-hmm. on how to pull it all together. Mm-hmm. So we want to give the viewers an opportunity to really be able to get a chance to dissect and really get a better understanding of Dr. Marshall. So I would like to just transition to this transformational leader that you are, because we know that we live in a world where abuse is silent.
Yes.
Abuse is silent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to give you an opportunity to talk.
Mm-hmm.
So share, if you would like to share with us your story, take us back, take us through the journey of how it started and get us up to speed to where you at now today.
Okay, I just want to preference that if you hear a little bit of noise, today's my 18-year-old son's birthday. He's 19 now. And
Wow.
so he may be coming in and changing clothes to, go on a date or something. I don't know. He's a teenager. I don't know if any of you have teenagers, but you understand. So, wow. So I was a teenager actually when I met my now ex-husband, who was born in Jamaica, came to America at about 9 years old, and we met each other at age 18. I was 18, and I think he was like 20, something like that. And he was in a church. I was in a church, and um, I don't think at that time I understood that going to church doesn't mean that it's in you. But I came to that revelation not too long after, as well as I think I got married at about 21. So it was pretty fast. Before I knew it, I was married and had a baby. And I had no idea that I was dating or with someone who was abusive. And the reason why I didn't know was because I wasn't trained to understand the language. Okay, so abusers have a language, right? And there are things that they do to indicate to you that they are abusive. And those things I hadn't been taught, right? So things like intimidation, things like name calling, things like isolation, isolating you from others, from your family, other controlling behavior, blaming you for an argument or a situation that went bad. Um, Other things like sort of this master of the castle man, I'm the man and you're the woman, sort
Right.
of, all of those are behaviors, and as well as when it begins to get intense, it's sort of like a smashing things, a scary look that's sort of controlling. It's just like, are we about to fight? Like, I thought we were just arguing. Like, now it looks a little like my mother when I was touching something I didn't need to touch. You know what I mean? So, and that's the kind of the slow creep. I think that over time, these relationships get worse for other people. It might be right from the beginning. It wasn't that for me. um I got married, I'm super saved and love the Lord and full of the Holy Spirit. And so in my mind, I really thought that God valued the sanctity of marriage. And so my Christian faith kind of spilled in that I thought, pretty much the Bible says God hates marriage. I mean, hates divorce.
Right.
And this divorce thing was a bad thing. It was bad. So I needed to pray hard that things will change.
So you're saying that you're understanding the context of your religious belief at the time had you really kind of not really accepting that it was really abuse that was being formulated at the time, right?
Yeah, I think it's not that I didn't know that it was abuse. I think that for some women, there's something called the cycle of violence, right? And violence takes this wheel around. And so sometimes that wheel can take 6 months for a woman, and sometimes that wheel is like every 10 days. So there's a peaceful time, like sort of like a honeymoon period, and then there are little arguments, and then, you know, something happens, and then there's a violent act. And then there's this switch in power, right? And because now he's sad about what he did, or he feels guilty, or he doesn't want you to leave. And so now the power shifts to the woman. And it's just like, please don't leave me, baby, don't leave me. And then you just kind of go through this wheel again. But that wheel could be 10 days for one woman,
Okay.
and 6 months for another woman. So sometimes you could be kind of lulled to sleep, you know, because it only happens like every 6 months. And then it might not be for some women a closed fist punch, but it will be the other things, the controlling of your money, giving you an allowance. It could be, you know, yelling at you all the time, or pushing you, pulling you, putting you down. That's a very big one, because it's a real way to break a woman's self-esteem down. And so you almost gotta kind of lash out with these negative words. If I was talking in a church, I would say it's like curses being slurred at you, right? You're terrible, you're fat, you're ugly, no one wants you. Like, you gotta just break this woman down. And I think we talked about this before, where I said most of the time domestic violence happens to strong women. It really doesn't happen to weak women, or whatever society would call a weak woman.
Wait, go back. I just heard something. I just heard something, and we're gonna have to revisit that. You said that from your experience and also your expert experience, you said that it happens to strong women.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so explain that a little bit, and then let's revisit how you started off with your religious beliefs had you kind of, you know, because God said He hates divorce.
Yes.
So let's revisit that back. Let's talk about that strong woman. And before you get into that, yeah, revisit that part when you said that God hates divorce, and it had you thinking that you had to accept what was going on.
Mm-hmm. I think really I was ignorant, right?
Okay.
So I really didn't know what I was in. How I found out that domestic violence was a thing that I was in was one day I was in college, and I was in a social work program, and they hosted a domestic violence like session for all the social work students and all the counseling students at Nyack College. And I attended, and literally my jaw hit the floor, because there were all these Christian psychologists and therapists that were talking to the whole entire student body. And they were talking about things like safety planning, which is how you get out, right? Which is what I did soon as I learned what I should have been doing.
Okay.
So as well as, you know, all of the feelings that I was dealing with, the depression and the isolation from my family. You know, I got moved physically from Brooklyn, New York to New Jersey. And it was said that we were going to restart our family and do all of these things, but the fighting never stopped, right?
Okay.
And so definitely I would say that, man, you have to educate yourself, right? And I think for me, I was praying, right? And since I was communicating with God, the information that I did not have, He brought to me, because I would take advantage of the information had I had it. You know, if I had it, I just didn't know. You know, I was hiding scars at church. You know, I was hiding scars at work.
So listen to this. They say, since you started the conversation off and you took it to your belief system and you took it to church, last I checked, they say church is a hospital for the broken.
Mm-hmm.
right? For you to prepare your broken heart, your broken spirit, right?
Mhm.
And so why would you cover in that type of environment where people generally come open and say, this is my situation, I need prayer, I
Mhm.
need assistance, I need support? You ended up going to your school and stumbling upon resources, right?
Mhm.
So two things there. I'm gonna give you an opportunity to share that, but two things there. Your community provided around you,
Mhm.
provided resources that you eventually needed.
Mhm.
So if you didn't get out and make a movement into certain communities, now your community was your education community, your school, you wouldn't have never been able to get that information, right?
Right.
So even though you was being intentionally isolated,
Mhm.
yeah, by you going to school and your school supplying these resources, you
Mhm.
was able to learn what you actually was in.
Right.
But back to the fact that you actually talked about what you just stated, when it goes into the fact that, these things were happening, you were ignorant to it, you didn't know what was going on, and now this whole thing opens your world up, and you went to church and hid it. Talk to us a little bit about that. Why would you hide in church?
So whether it's church or not, one of the big issues for women who are suffering from domestic violence is the shame that accompanies domestic violence. And the shame is like another blow. So if you're already dealing with violence and there is a possibility of shame
Ah,
or your environment blaming you for the violence, that is a whole nother level of abuse to a woman that is in a domestic violence situation. And you end up believing what he says, that it's your fault, because that's what people say, right? That's what you have to deal with often. And so I think for me, the shame, I was afraid of the shame. And I was dealing with the shame. So when you're in shame, you have to hide. You have to go into hiding, and you almost develop another person, right, to survive all of this. So you're just wearing this mask. And I still will say that I would have never made it if I didn't have a community of faith. Because while I could hide from people, I couldn't and I didn't have to hide from God. That
wow.
was the one place that I could be completely honest with myself and with God. And having that relationship opened up an opportunity for me to get out. So, and pretty much praying and talking to God, you know, laying out on the floor, worshiping, crying, weeping, I probably would have had, I just couldn't even tell you how many times worship took layers of stress and pressure off of me to go on, to care for my children, to pray for my husband, to try to have a better home. Um, yeah. So,
So now that you brought it to the context of your faith, right? There may be individuals listening who necessarily have not been attached to a church community,
mhm,
right? Um, Quite frankly, maybe they're not at that level of faith the way you were.
mhm,
On top of it, we're now dealing with, what's going on presently in our society, the global pandemic,
mhm,
which has prevented people from going certain places.
mhm.
So, are you just saying that it was just your faith that got you through, or was it some other things that was exposed that you realized you had inside of you, or was it just on your faith that you believe got you through it?
So I think I live from a place of faith, so it's pretty hard for me to talk about other things. Um, I am a woman of faith. I believe in God, and I certainly prayed my way through these situations. But I think it was in those prayer times that when I lived everyday life, that I came into information that allowed me to understand that I was believing the wrong things, right? I believed that God honored the sanctity of marriage, right? It's everything, till death do us part and all of those things. But I learned that God values the sanctity of life above the sanctity of marriage.
Okay, wait a minute, because you just gave us some jewels there. You separated, not separated, but you talk more of you said clarity
Mm-hmm.
that God, he honors, you said faith,
Mm-hmm.
correct me now,
Yeah.
but but what supersedes that with God? You said life.
Yeah. So no, what I'm saying is that because marriage is a sacred institution in the
Okay.
Bible, right? And so you often hear that, God honors the sanctity of marriage, but he let me know that he honors life more than he honors the sanctity of my life, of every person's life, more than he honors the sanctity of a marriage. He
Okay.
loves me, and my life is worth living. My life is of value to him. And marriage doesn't come before my life.
So God was not going to allow you to stay in a marriage that brought you to a place of shame and covering. God brought you to a place of liberation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. God brought you to a place of liberation. So there may be individuals, whether it's through their faith or certain communities, they may be hiding not only in shame, but hiding in a belief system that they have to stay attached to the abuse and the abuser.
Yes. Yes, whether it's a faith or not. But yeah, no, your life is more important. I will say, you know, it's different for different women. When what I'm talking about is your exit is different for different women. For some women, it's hard to say because a lot of practitioners would say, get out right now. But have you ever heard the term that says, take your head out of the alligator's mouth or out of the lion's
The
mouth?
lions, yeah.
The lion's mouth slowly?
Don't wiggle your head while it's in the lion's mouth.
Right. So what I did was sort of like the Sleeping with the Enemy movie. That's what we call safety planning. So my education was a part of my safety planning. Saving my money was a part of my safety planning. Um, Talking to my pastor and being open about it with my pastor. Talking to my family and beginning to expose what was going on. I could expose it to the females, like my mother and my sister, but I couldn't do that with my brothers because I didn't know what was going to happen, right? So, and I'm trying to take my head out slow. I'm not trying to like blow everything.
So there was a period where you were still, even at some point, although you knew it had to be an exit plan and a safety plan, you were still almost trying to save or protect your abuser to some degree.
I wasn't looking at it like that. I
Okay.
was looking at it as I have a plan in place. And so my plan is to get out. And here's what I need to get out because now I have information. That did not mean that I automatically had the courage because I didn't. And one of the things about fear is that you can't run from it. You have to face it. And I had to face it. And I had to face what was happening to me. What was happening to me wasn't love. What was happening to me wasn't a reflection of God. What was happening to me as well as an individual woman, I was losing myself. I was completely clinically depressed. Like, you know, I had lost who Chikera was. And so, while I had a husband that I did love, the love was I loved him. Um, I think that what was happening wasn't love. And so I had to be honest about that.
Wow.
And I
Okay.
had to begin to believe that I could do this,
So
right?
when you
Because
say
that's a part of the fear.
right,
Mm-hmm.
when you say love, there's different parts of love,
Yes,
right? Love has different levels to it.
absolutely.
And so how could you love your abuser?
So love is not something that you could pray away, that you could say, I don't love you I loved you yesterday, but I don't love you tomorrow. No. If you've ever had a bad breakup with someone you actually fell in love with, you could get over a lot of things, but the love takes time to get over. You can't shut it down the next day because you actually loved someone, right? So it's sort of like, I, I will say it's beyond what we would call a soul tie, right? So the intertwining of a soul is something spiritual, something that you can pray and get deliverance from, or that you could get healing from. But you can't get healing from love.
Okay.
You can't get healing from love. If you love someone, it's going to take time not to love that person anymore. So it was just going to take time, because I honestly loved my husband, right? For the person that he was outside of the abuse, or the person I fell in love with prior to me even knowing he was abusive at that time.
And you wanted to find a way to help him, or
Absolutely not. I wanted to find a way to get out.
okay.
So I was working on a plan to get out. I didn't need my brother and him to get into like a fight or a shootout or something crazy. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
just saying that to throw it out there. But
Right, to say that it was
I
at
didn't
all
want
costs.
that. I wasn't
Right.
trying to protect him. I just had a plan now. My pastor knew about it. My teachers knew about it. My sister knew about it. I had a list of things that I needed to get out. And probably it only took me maybe about a month or so to actually get out. I do want to preface this, Rashidi. I had a chance to get out before. So I prayed. We had a very bad fight. And I took my child and both of my children, and I left. Went to my sister's house, went to the family's house. And then I got into, I called the shelter, and through the information that I got, right? So I need to preference that because I did have the information to get into a domestic violence shelter, and I got into a brand new domestic violence shelter. Beautiful. And I think my son was 5 and my other son was 1 or under 1. He hadn't turned 1 yet.
Wow. So you had very small. You
Yeah,
had
they were small. So
infant.
I got
Mhm.
out. But what happened is that he found me. And domestic violence shelters are private. And what I did wrong is that I had a vehicle, and he followed my vehicle. And so when he found out where I was, he's like, let's move let's move somewhere else. We're going to start our family over. And, crying, begging, pleading. And I gave up the opportunity that God gave me to get out. But I had no idea that it would take me 8 years to get out again.
Wait, say that 8 years?
7 to 8 years to get out.
Now, you know, 8 represents the number of new beginnings, and it took you 8 years.
I had no idea. 8 years. So I want to say that because if there is a woman who is in a violent situation and you have an opportunity to leave, and you know, for one, you don't know if you're going to live to see the next time, because the fight that caused me to leave is that pretty much I was like thrown out of a window. So yeah. So 8 years goes by, and then this the worst fight ever, and I'm like hanging from a window. And so it just so happens that, you know, that's what people would say, but I would say it was God, that I was, you know, hanging and dangling from a window. And I think a police officer, that we were having a bad fight, and someone finally called the police after like an hour of me getting like beat to death and almost passing out. And then I ran into the bathroom, and that was the window that I went out of. And the other police were at the door, but one cop decided to go to the back of the house to take like a leak or something. And as he turned the corner, he came and caught me.
Wow.
He caught me. And we were both hurt, but he caught me, broke my fall. Him and I both fell. It was, I mean, I was, I don't know what else to say. I was falling. And he went to the back to take a pee. Like, really?
He was your
I
angel
felt that.
that day.
I
He was
felt that you had to pee because God told you that my feet are not even supposed to touch the ground. And
wow.
so he just turned the corner. He's like going to take a pee, and he looks up and he comes under and he catches me, and we both fall. And had he not been there, I don't know if I would have been alive today. So I'm just saying this to say that if you have an opportunity to get out, you need to stay out. You need to abide by the rules. If there are any rules, if you get into a domestic violence shelter, don't talk to your abuser. Like, don't, you know, just stay right there. You know, stay right there.
I'll tell you, your story is very powerful because and Asaf Farad, one of my mentors, coined this. He says facts tell, but stories sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so people really get a better viewpoint when they hear your story. And I'm listening to your story. And as we make a transition, I wanted to really look at the fact that usually when someone tells their story more than once, a lot of times people you know, they say that you're not detached yet, you haven't let it go, you haven't really healed, you know, you constantly talking about it, but you're using your story to help countless individuals, your community, rise from the ashes, get beauty for their ashes, right? For what they went through. So it's your story, and you can cry if you want to. So let's talk about that a little bit, because sometimes people take it as if you constantly talking about it, you whining about it, or you keep bringing it back up. But what's the significance in your story, telling your story more than once? Tell us about that, Dr. Marshall.
So I will say that, you know, it reminds me of a scripture: we overcome by the word of our testimony, right? And the point is that people change by stories, right? So when they hear, and it's just like me, I got to this place where the therapists were talking, and they were bringing up stories, and they were talking about cases of safety planning and all of this stuff, and those things affected me. When people hear your story and they see an example of someone who's overcome, an awakening to them that they can overcome as well. And one of the things about being a victim of domestic violence, or, you know, having trauma or deep hurts, is that when you're in it, you don't know that you could feel you don't have, that you could feel differently, that, you know, there is a day that you could not have all of these negative emotions and be full of pure joy. And one of the indications of healing is forgiveness. And the forgiveness is so deep that you forgive the person as if they've never done anything to you.
Wow. Okay. 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 Because
Yeah.
you giving us healing plans here, Dr. Marshall. You said that you can get to the point where you can forgive as if it never happened.
As if it never happened to you ever.
So you're trying to tell me that although the scar is there, you can get to a point where it never happened.
Absolutely. That's how far your healing can go. Is that is as if you can forgive that person as if it's never happened. And there's absolutely no sting of pain connected to what you've been through.
Now, is the forgiveness for you, or is it for the individual, or it's for both?
The forgiveness is for you. The forgiveness is for you. Whenever you forgive someone, it is for you. Um, your unforgiveness, I don't believe that your unforgiveness actually holds people hostage, because people go on with their life. Like, you know, your abuser could
True.
be on, you know, his second or third wife, and you still talking about these scars that you have. So forgiveness is for you. Definitely, for you to have a healed heart, for you to be open to healing, to renewal, to restoration. It's definitely, you can't do it with bitterness. And one of the things that I like to preference about bitterness is that it means hurt. It means deep hurt. And people, there's often this negative connotation when it comes to bitterness. So bitter, that you have deep hurt, and I guess this speaks back to the cause and that effect, right? The result is that you got deep hurt, and now you hurt every other person. You hurt men, you dog them, or you say bad things about them. And forgiveness sort of like takes the air out of that. It frees you from that. And once that deep pain leaves you, then forgiveness is pretty easy.
Well, that's the uniqueness about your story, because generally, if someone, I mean, thrown out of a window, consistently abused in many different areas, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally,
Financially.
financially, spiritually, and just abused in all those different areas, right? You know, it's understandable if you develop some type of hate for the individual and for the act. So sometime in our society has been interpreted where some people have went on and said, I hate the opposite sex. Now we know that abuse is not just coined from male to female. We know that there's also female to male, and we also know that there's also abuse from the same gender to each other. So abuse can go across all lines.
Absolutely.
But we're telling your story tonight, and your story is from that position. So as I listen to you and I process what you're saying, I mean, you're saying some powerful things, and you found a way. And I think that we talk about finding a way, and you can help me out here.
Mm-hmm.
It seems as if something was weaved in your fabric from the get-go.
That's very, very true. So
Mhm.
I will definitely say that, again, back to my faith, the way that I experienced healing, um, from this trauma, um, I think I was in cycles of reprogramming my subconscious mind before I even knew it. Right. So I was in these cycles of renewal with the Word of God, actually Um, I was at a point where I was left with virtually no money. I had no food. I would go to the store with like handfuls of change, and like I had a bare refrigerator, and I would just have one thing, and somehow I had 3 meals a day. I don't know how God fed us because we had no money. I had no food in my refrigerator. And so, yeah, I think that during that time, you know, I would say to God that I lean my dead heart
Wow.
on your word.
Wow.
And so I had the Bible and I would read it all night and all day. And I kind of walked around with it like you would think I was a mad woman. You know, those people who walk down the street reading a book, like that was me. And I read it and read it and read it. And I I didn't know from the spiritual side that I was eating bread, that I was feasting on something that was living. And the Bible is a living, breathing book. And so I ate it all night. I would have panic attacks sometime, and I would just read hours and hours. I woke up with it, I slept with it next to my bed. And before I knew it, everything that was inside of me was gone. I was healed. And I had no idea what was happening to me is that your pain, the lies, you need what the world would probably say is like positive affirmations. But for me, positive affirmations wasn't enough. Like a positive word wasn't enough
Wow.
to conquer the lies um, that were sown into me, right? Because they were designed to control me, to constrict me, to bring me down so that I was controllable, right? And so I needed something more powerful than those words.
Right. So it was like almost like a failing motivation. I don't need more motivation. I need an impartation.
Yes, I need something stronger than the lies that not only that I was told, but that I began to believe about myself. And so that's what the word of God did to me. And so I reprogrammed my subconscious mind. And while I was reprogramming my mind, my soul was being healed by the word of God. And so,
I tell you, Dr. Marshall, you are really, really just blessing us tonight. There were some questions that came in, and we're coming up on our last 10 minutes, and I definitely want to give
already?
you, I'm telling you, and I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to really give our listeners, really let them hear your heart and give them a word of encouragement before we exit out. But Alive Chapel International, USA, asked the question about, did you find that you experienced other forms of abuse in other areas of your life? And I thought that you did very well. I thought you answered it very well, but I did not want to overlook their question. So they said that did you experience other forms of abuse in other areas of your life after now coming in contact and understanding what abuse is?
So I think the greatest abuse that I experienced was the abuse that I did to myself. And so, if you have if you have lies sown into your life, like you're not smart or you're not pretty or you're fat or whatever this person is saying to you, those are like seeds, right? And they grow into trees, and they grow into um, false truths that you begin to believe. So even when the abuse is over, right? Even when you've gone on, you have to contend with your mindset. You have to contend with what you repeat and believe about yourself. That has to be rewritten because they're false. But you live out of what you believe. So you have to change that. And so women will often abuse themselves, even if they get out. They'll abuse themselves and say, "Oh, I'm not that pretty," or, "I want to stand in the back. I'm kind of fat. My stomach," or, like they'll whatever it is. It could be anything. Yeah. So I would say the abuse that women do to themselves is big.
And women and whoever, right? It's so important that you conquer, right? That inner voice, right?
Yes.
So that inner voice, and we talk about the language of scars, and scars are not always visible.
Right.
There's some scars that are invisible,
yes,
that others don't see. And you talked about it, the language, the scar of shame. That's a scar.
You know what? I think that women think that people don't see them, but people do. They just don't show up as "I'm being abused at home." They show up in other ways. They may show up in anxiety. They may show up in other types of ways, but they don't show, if you're hiding domestic violence, there are behaviors that other people are seeing about you. So you really aren't hiding from the trained eye. Like, I can spot domestic violence, 2 yards, 2 miles away.
You can see it a mile away now, right? And you actually look for it. So I would say to you, Dr. Marshall, what can you say? What would you like to say, right, to the viewers out there and the listeners? How can Her New Leaf help a community of victims? Because we understand that, especially now with the pandemic again, people have been isolated. People have been detached from their community, possibly their resources. What would you say to these individuals? How can they go on now and find that conquering strength that you found? Because I really believe that there's something weaved in your fabric from the get-go, that you were uniquely and wonderfully made, and you are walking in purpose and destiny. Talk to us.
So I would say that women can reach out to me. My Instagram handle, I think it's somewhere, or it will be on the screen, and I think it's on the flyer, but it's Her New Leaf _coach. And
wait, say that again. Repeat that again, very loud, so everybody can hear that. How can they stay in touch with you?
I have a Facebook as well as an Instagram, and it's Her New Leaf _coach. And I'm going to be having some coaching programs coming up pretty shortly, and those will be advertised on my social media handles, as well as some speed coaching. And women can reach out to me. I'm in my DMs. You can DM me. Sometimes you just need to make that first connection, which is a very powerful thing. The second thing that is one of my most important values is confidentiality. So you will never know. I don't care who you are. No one will ever know that you are talking to me, that you are working with me. Confidentiality is first. It is a safety, and that woman needs a safe space. And so I definitely provide that, because the shame of even talking about it makes it hard to get out of. And some women don't exactly know that they need to get out. I told you about the cycle of violence. Sometimes, it was last year since me and him fought. You know what I mean? And so, we've been good since then. But all the other violent behaviors are happening. The yelling, the control, those things. So I would say reach out to me at Her New Leaf _coach. And if you know somebody, that is going through
Speak up. That's what you tell.
I'm sorry. I was saying, if you know somebody.
No, I said I'm agreeing with you. I said to the community of listeners, speak up.
Yes.
Don't just sit back. You know, you have the information.
Right.
But I want to say this, Dr. Marshall, we at 7:55, and as we chime down, you have two amazing young men that you have helped rear, not raise, rear.
Yes.
Right? Can you just give us a snippet after being a mother, a wife who went through this and conquered it? What is your hope for your sons?
Oh boy, I'm going to keep it really quick. So I basically social worked my children. That's what I call it. I initially started, I said, God, how do I prevent them from being an abuser? And he told me to do two things. He said, take them to therapy. And he said, keep them in church. The other thing I did was I did research. I spent a lot of family time with them. So I took them on Broadway. I took them to the park. I took them to WWF wrestling. I did all this mommy stuff with them, right? I researched when you're coming out of abuse, one of the things that you need to do, or trauma, is change your environment. And so I basically became like a little decorator, right? And I decorated their spaces. Wow. In their new place of living. I just social worked them with love, with care, and took them to therapy, took them to church. And in the worship, God does some healing. You know what I mean? So I just did what I was instructed to do. And I also did some research, like what happens when you come out of an abusive situation or trauma. What should you do? And decor, the colors you wear. There was all of this stuff out there. So I just did it all. And developed a rock solid relationship with my sons. And oh man, it's just they are wonderful, you know.
So you made sure that you made it intentional to give them the resources, and you really just exposed us to something. With your story was stay connected to the right community resources.
Absolutely.
You know, don't stay disconnected. Plug into platforms like what HAC is providing, what FDC is providing for you. Stay plugged in. And so we know that your program, Dr. Marshall, is only intended for women. Only women can reach out to you, or any other sex, but you're specifically just dealing with women right now?
I'm coaching women, but anybody can reach out to me.
Okay.
I pretty much have resources for everyone. So definitely you can reach out to me.
So it's not a limitation of just women. Everybody can reach out to you that need these resources, that need to be plugged in and connected. Yes. And if you can't service them on your level, you have a network that you can plug them into.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Marshall, we are so excited that you came on this platform tonight. We have to talk about bringing you back on future platforms and segments. But we just want to say to you, we thank you so much for coming on HAC TV and sharing your story and owning your story. And we thank you so much that you allow FDC to come in and provide this amazing platform that you can come and let people understand that there's a language behind the scars. There's a language to victory, and you are overcomer, you are conqueror, and we thank you so much for being so transparent. You are amazing transformational leader. Go out there and continue to trailblaze your community abroad.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and definitely stay plugged into HAC, please, audience.
We are so excited. Well, audience, you heard it. Dr. Marshall, make sure you stay plugged in. Make sure you stay tuned in, because HAC is coming. We got some amazing things ahead. Meet us back again next week with the language of scars.